12 American tourists organized 19 days a luxurious, albeit with some physically challenging, tour of Italy one summer. Among them were 5 married couples and a mother-daughter team. The couples did not know each other before the tour, but since they were of similar social and educational backgrounds, they expected to get along well. Their Italian guide, Gina, was experienced and educated, with master's degrees in humanities and Italian history from Sapienza University, and had a pleasant demeanor while maintaining the ability to be in control of any situation. 4 of the travelers were unlucky. Couple Ryan and Sylvia Bodine, married 24 years, and mother-daughter team Mary and Stacy Warren. All 4, of course, were looking forward to a trip to the legendary Capri, Naples, and the Amalfi Coast, but each of them had their own reasons for this adventure. Ryan Bodine was 44 years old at the start of the journey and a highly successful intellectual property attorney from the Washington, D.C. area in the United States. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighed 185 pounds 84 kilograms of wiry muscle, had blonde hair and blue eyes, was a good tennis player and cyclist, and a keen cross-trainer. Ryan graduated from engineering school at age 20 and married his college sweetheart, 21-year-old Sylvia, a week after he graduated from Stanford University, and she graduated from Menlo College. They have 2 children, 22-year-old Austin, who himself graduated from Stanford a year ago and now works in a high-end engineering position in Northern Virginia, and 19-year-old Brittany, who is taking a summer course in organic chemistry between her freshman and sophomore years at the University of Virginia. Despite financial difficulties, Ryan and Sylvia enjoyed their lives while he attended law school at Northwestern University while working part-time as a legal couple at an intellectual property firm in Chicago, and Sylvia, when she wasn't carrying Austin, worked at a marketing firm in the Chicago suburbs. After Ryan graduated, Sylvia and little Austin moved to North Virginia, and Ryan began working for the largest intellectual property firm in Washington. Ryan and Sylvia had serious marital problems when Austin was 12 and Brittany 9. Sylvia started an affair with Jorge, another partner at the firm where Ryan worked. When Ryan found out about this, he immediately ended the affair and demanded that the firm fire Jorge. "It's either him or me," he told the management team. Showing poor judgment since Ryan was the best employee of the company, the best lawyer in trials, and always said what he thought the management did not take Ryan seriously and offered him more money to make him humble. 2 months later, Ryan gave his 2 weeks' notice and had already formed his own law firm, taking with him 2 lawyers from his current firm and 2 partners from competing firms to join him at Bodine, Carlton, and Winston, one of the most successful law firms of any type in the Washington area. Ryan's firm panicked when he handed in his notice and offered to fire Jorge, but it was too late. Plus, Ryan had a plan for Jorge that didn't involve physical violence, even though he really wanted to beat him up, but was more meaningful in the long run. Ryan hired a hacker who, a month after he left the firm, was able to change an important brief filed by Jorge for a key client to include the sentence. Of course, the plaintiff's lawyer doesn't expect Judge Bryant to understand this complex legal issue, because he's a damn idiot. But these arguments are still made to preserve the issue for appeal. Unsurprisingly, Jorge was held in contempt by Judge Bryant, the plaintiff lost the case, the client was outraged and threatened to file a malpractice suit, and Jorge was not only fired, but was unlikely to find a similar job when the whole situation was covered nationally in the Journal of the American Bar Association. Ryan was able to forgive Sylvia and get over her betrayal because she seemed sincere and repentant, but mainly because Ryan couldn't imagine life without daily interaction with his young children, who had a better relationship with him than with Sylvia. Over the past year, Sylvia seemed to have lost interest in significant intimacy, and as if her thoughts were elsewhere. Ryan hired a private investigator who discovered that it was not related to the affair. Although Sylvia organized the entire trip, Ryan was also on board. Ryan's secondary goal for the Italian trip was to try to rekindle Sylvia's romantic feelings, or at least find out the reason for her lost interest. At 45 years old, Sylvia had been experiencing problems for the past few years. 14 months that she never came to terms with. Sylvia knew that she was adopted, but had no details about her biological family. About 16 months ago, through a DNA test on 23andMe, she contacted a 65-year-old woman who turned out to be her biological aunt, the sister of her biological mother. Through her aunt and the work of the Genealogical Society, she learned that her biological parents were of Italian descent from the Amalfi Coast, and that her birth name was Gabriella Amendola. Amendola is the surname of approximately 12% of the inhabitants of the Amalfi Coast. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 6 months old, and her aunt was the only living relative who could find her. However, at 20 years old, she could not afford and was not emotionally ready to take care of a child, so Sylvia was given up for adoption and her name was changed to Sylvia Evans. Because her adoptive parents were of English and German descent, there was no Italian influence in her life. Sylvia felt a sadness that she couldn't quite pinpoint after learning this information. She was a beautiful woman who usually kept herself in good physical shape, but began to lose muscle tone because she was passionate about this topic and her thoughts constantly wandered. Although this probably has nothing to do with her recent discoveries about her origins, she also sometimes remembered her affair 10 years ago and felt significant remorse. Even though Ryan gave every indication that he had forgiven her, she doubted it and did not consider herself worthy of his forgiveness. She didn't share her feelings about her origins or remorse with Ryan or anyone else. When Sylvia heard about a luxury trip to the Amalfi Coast, she took the opportunity to visit her birth parents' homeland and try to feel connected to her roots. Therefore, the main reason for the Italian trip for Sylvia was not just a vacation, but also an attempt to find a connection with her roots and, as a secondary issue, an attempt to overcome her belated feelings of guilt. 18-year-old Stacy was a high school student and a truly beautiful young woman. She had suffered from an illness in early childhood that had kept her there for a year, but she was now completely healthy and a good athlete and student. Her biological father died when she was 6 years old, but although she was very young at that time, she still remembered him well because he always treated her like a princess and called her my special girl. Stacy's mother Mary remarried Tim Burton, 6 years her junior, when Stacy was 9. Tim's only good quality, according to Stacy, was that he was handsome. Stacy hated her stepfather with a passion even before he married Mary, and threw a tantrum when Mary considered taking Tim's last name. To appease Stacy, Mary agreed to keep her late husband's last name, Warren, and Stacy always made sure everyone knew that her last name belonged to her real father and not her stepfather. Besides the vacation, Stacy's other reason for taking the trip was to convince her mother that she should throw Tim out because he was a leech who couldn't hold down a job and behaved inappropriately with Stacy's friends. 40-year-old Mary Warren has an exotic appearance and an unusual beauty like her daughter, highlighted by her shiny blonde curly hair, which she wears to her shoulders, and piercing steel blue eyes. Probably 10% of the hetero male population would find Mary's look striking, another 50% would find her beautiful, and the final 40% would find her attractive, but nothing special. However, there is one thing that all straight men will likely agree on. She has the perfect ass, round, firm, and a little big with hips that complement her ass perfectly. Mary is a petite woman standing at 5'3", 160 cm, and weighing 114 pounds 52 kg, but with full breasts and as many curves as a 114 lb woman could have. She is smart, personable, and friendly. Those who know her are also well aware that there is a mischievous element to her character, which some might call playful and others wild. Although no one could ever tell by the way she treats other people, Mary is also extremely wealthy thanks to trust funds set up by her wealthy parents and grandparents, and because her first husband was a man of considerable means and left all the fortune to her when he died. Although Mary does not lead an ostentatious life, she donates hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, always anonymously, to charity, as well as a significant portion of her time. Last year, Mary, certainly encouraged by Stacy, began to question her relationship with Tim. With each passing year, his personality seems to become less attractive, and his inability to even try to get a long-term job irritates her. Another reason Mary took the excursion to Italy is to think more fully about her relationship with Tim and whether she should pull the plug by imposing a prenuptial agreement. 5 married couples arrived at the first hotel, where the tour group was to stay at approximately the same time before dinner. Mary and Stacy were supposed to arrive after dark. After a friendly dinner where all the couples got to know each other and had interesting conversations, and as the full moon rose in the sky over the Mediterranean Sea, Ryan walked out of the motel, breathing in the fresh night air and enjoying the peaceful surroundings. As he walked slowly, a couple of women got out of the limousine and began to carry their suitcases towards the hotel. All the travelers knew that Mary and Stacy would arrive late, and Ryan correctly assumed that these 2 women were the last 2 travelers to make up the tour. Ryan approached the women with an offer to help with their luggage, probably not endearing himself to the tip-hungry bellhops, when he saw Mary in the moonlight. He gasped loudly as the moonlight from a moon he thought was larger than he had ever seen before illuminated her with an eerie light. Without a doubt, Mary was the most charming woman he had ever seen in his life. If he weren't used to the unexpected in a courtroom, he would probably be tongue-tied and unable to talk to the woman who had just knocked his socks off. Luckily, Ryan recovered and approached the women in his usual friendly manner. "You must be Mary and Stacy," he smiled. "Which one of you is which?" he chuckled, at the risk of angering one or both of them. In an apparently fake, quiet voice, Stacy said, "I'm a mom, man. What are your intentions for my daughter?" Mary immediately chimed in a fake, high-pitched voice. "I'm 18, Stacy. I hope you're not a pervert." "Wow, these women are brave," Ryan said to himself, and all 3 of them laughed. Ryan introduced himself and, so as not to irritate the staff, gave both suitcases to the bellman along with a tip of €10, which would be delivered to their room, which they had already entered. Ryan introduced Mary and Stacy to the rest of the tour group, who were chatting in the living room. Day 2. For some reason, Ryan and Stacy's personalities were a perfect match. By the end of the second day, they had had several long conversations, played tennis, and laughed at each other's stupid jokes. Ryan quietly pressed Stacy for all the information he could about Mary, but not too overtly, and Stacy wasn't shy about revealing her secrets. Ryan, Sylvia, Mary, and Stacy dined at a table for 6, and after the liqueurs they played bridge, Ryan and Stacy against Mary and Sylvia. Stacy was terribly excited about their victory, Ryan was apologetic, and Mary and Sylvia were both met with fake ridicule. Ryan thought he had managed to hide his ogling gaze at Mary, maybe not for everyone. Sylvia seemed more interested in the trip than any of the other tourists, and a smile was constantly on her face, although her expression of intimacy did not increase. Day 3. The day started off on a sad note for Mary, but an exciting one for Stacy. Unbeknownst to Mary, a few days before the trip, Stacy had asked a couple of her nerdy high school friends to install cameras in the master bedroom and one of the guest rooms of the mini mansion she shared with Mary and Tim. The cameras were streamed to the cloud and accessible from Stacy's iPhone. Stacy showed Mary a video of Tim cheating on her iPhone, just a day after Mary and Stacy went to Italy. "This guy is a worthless asshole, Mom. You really need to dump him. You're very sexy and could find a guy who deserves you, someone like Ryan." Mary was ashamed that she was not surprised by Tim's infidelity. This made her angry, but she did not shed a tear. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ryan noticed some severity in Mary's behavior. He asked Stacy, whom he thought he had known for years, about this. "It's no big deal," Stacy smiled. "You and I can talk her out of it," and by lunchtime they did. The afternoon of the 3rd day was a trip to a private beach on the Amalfi Coast. Ryan and Stacy at least briefly threw the frisbee along with everyone else in the group, including guide Gina. Mary showed off her playful side by joining Stacy as they took turns climbing onto Ryan's shoulders in the Mediterranean and diving into the water at least half a dozen times each. He felt ashamed when Stacy approached him while he was sneaking glances at Mary, theoretically hidden behind his dark hair, wrapping glasses, and whispered to him, "I like looking at Mom's ass, it's perfect, isn't it?" Ryan responded by picking up Stacy and then throwing her into the sea as she laughed hysterically. All the other travelers were smiling broadly. Ryan noticed that Sylvia's happiness increased even more. She seemed to want to enjoy every aspect of the Amalfi Coast and chatted to anyone who would listen, both on the beach and on the way back to the hotel. To his surprise, he noticed that she was talking to some locals who he didn't know spoke English. Ryan's difficult condition didn't improve when Mary showed up to dinner in an elegant dress with a plunging neckline and a side slit that exposed a significant portion of her thigh and showed off her shapely butt. Ryan really needed relief from his difficult condition, and despite attempts at romance and Sylvia's happy mood, she did not respond to his sexual advances for the first 2 nights of the trip. Over the past year or so, the only time Sylvia had truly relaxed and seemed to come out of her distant state were when she had drunk too much wine. So Ryan made every effort to get her drunk that evening. Luckily for him, he was completely successful. Days 4-8. The tour has been incredibly successful so far. Everyone got along well, especially the 4 unlucky travelers. Mary seemed to grow close to both Ryan and Sylvia, and Ryan and Stacy had a relationship similar to that of a favorite uncle with his favorite niece. Stacy was always polite to Sylvia, but behind her facade there were other sentiments. All the locations were great, all the physical activity was enjoyable and stimulating, and the food and drinks were classic. As one example, Ryan, Sylvia, Stacy, Mary, and 3 others rented bikes and rode around the Amalfi Coast for most of the day. The other 6 rented electric assist bikes, but Ryan was too proud to do so. He was embarrassed when Stacy and 2 others passed him on the uphill climb, and he had to buy drinks for all the cyclists. During the trip, Sylvia beamed throughout the day and interacted with the locals at every opportunity. Day 9. The day was a break from the usual physical activity and sightseeing, and the travelers had a free afternoon for shopping in Naples, agreeing to meet at a designated location at 5 p.m. to return by luxury minibus to their hotel on the Amalfi Coast in time for cocktail hour and dinner. Ryan reluctantly agreed to go, but since it gave him another chance to see Mary, he decided at the last minute to join the other 11 tourists. By 4:50 p.m., all the hikers except Stacy had returned to the meeting point. Gina asked where she was. "She left me half an hour ago to look for leather goods that someone told her about. She should be here by now," said Mary. Sensing the concern in Mary's voice, Ryan volunteered. "Everyone stay where you are, I'll find her." Mary gave him her iPhone, which was set up with an app to track Stacy's phone. "This will help," she said, and Ryan began to jog. According to the app, Stacy was probably 3 to 4 blocks away and motionless. When Ryan ran to the location indicated on Mary's phone, he didn't like what he saw. In a partially hidden area behind a building, he saw 3 men, whom he estimated to be in their early 20s, surrounding someone wearing red and blue clothing what Stacy had worn that day. He also thought he saw the glint of a knife. Ryan always carried a hard plastic object that, when used correctly, was as effective as brass knuckles, but was designed to look like a fancy key. It had 2 protruding surfaces, the first, which extended away from the user's hand when held, and the second, which extended in front of the fingers. Without hesitation, Ryan saved Stacy. "Until I find out what the laws are here, don't tell anyone the truth. Let's say that you fell hard and were delirious for several minutes. This is very important, understand?" "Yes, I understand," Stacy stammered, starting to cry again. Mary and the others panicked when Ryan brought Stacy back to the meeting place. Stacy insisted that Ryan hold her. He sat next to her in the minibus and held her on the way back to the hotel, telling Mary and the others that she had fallen badly and was temporarily delirious. Despite some skepticism, everyone seemed to accept this explanation. After Stacy showered and changed, Ryan came to her and Mary's room. He asked Mary to leave them alone, to which she agreed, coming down early for cocktail hour. Ryan collected all the clothes, including the shoes Stacy was wearing, and put them in a large plastic trash bag that already contained all of his clothes and shoes that he wore when he rescued her, and the hard plastic tool that he used to deal with the villains. He then gave Stacy the standard legal representation form he always carried with him, with blank fields for the date and her name, indicating that she had appointed him as her attorney. Ryan asked Stacy to fill out and sign the form and give him $1 to satisfy the form's monetary requirement of $1 and other kind and valuable considerations, the receipt and sufficiency of which is hereby acknowledged. He backdated the form to the third day of the excursion and asked Stacy to sign the dollar bill she gave him. I will advise you not to talk to anyone unless I, an Italian lawyer and a representative from the U.S. Embassy or consulate are there, and perhaps not even then, he said. Stacy thanked him sincerely and hugged him tightly. Instead of going to cocktail hour, Ryan took a trash bag into town, found a trash can behind a restaurant that didn't appear to have cameras, and threw the bag in there. On the way back to the hotel, Ryan bought 2 burner phones. Using one of the phones, he called the U.S. Embassy in Rome and asked for a recommendation from an Italian criminal lawyer in Naples. He was given 2 names. He called both of them on a second burner phone, a man and a woman, and left messages since their workday was already over, asking them to call him back on that phone to meet him and Stacy as soon as possible, with the woman representing Stacy and the man representing him. Day 10. The next morning, Ryan received replies from both lawyers. Once he had the answers, he took Stacy to a medical clinic, where a doctor who spoke good English confirmed that her injuries were minor and did not require further treatment. Ryan asked the doctor if he could confirm that the injuries could have been caused by a hard fall if authorities contacted him. The doctor thought for a second and then said, "Yes, I can say that without lying." At 11 a.m., Ryan and Stacy canceled their planned activities for the day and called a taxi to take them to one of the lawyer's offices, where another lawyer was to meet them. Ryan made a list of questions for Stacy to ask her lawyer while he met with his, and after their meeting he would join them. His warning was, "If she says in response to your first question that there is no attorney-client privilege, then stop the interview immediately and come to me." Ryan was pleased that both attorneys confirmed that attorney-client privilege is strong in Italy and that the right to refuse to testify is also a foundation of the Italian legal system. Ryan and Stacy then met with both lawyers together, and Ryan explained everything that happened. Both lawyers agreed that due to the nature, at least compared to the U.S. legal system, of defending the other in Italy, it was possible that Ryan could be prosecuted, even though in the U.S. it would be a clear case of defending the other. "Under the circumstances, I doubt they'll even arrest you, let alone prove their case," Ryan's lawyer advised, with Stacy's lawyer agreeing. Unfortunately, the lawyers also confirmed that in Italy it is a crime to lie to the police, so he needs to be very careful in the wording of his answers to their questions. Ryan and Stacy spent the day swimming, relaxing by the hotel pool, and playing cards until the others returned from their excursion. Everyone, especially Mary, was glad to see Stacy in a good mood. Mary sincerely thanked Ryan for helping Stacy. Once again, Sylvia was all smiles and spoke enthusiastically about what she saw that day on the Amalfi Coast. Day 11. Ryan's careful planning proved very useful when the next morning 2 detectives from Naples, who spoke good English, arrived at the hotel and asked to speak with Ryan. Apparently, he was identified from the street cameras as he was walking Stacy back to the bus because some passers-by gave a vague description of him as he ran into the area where the attack took place, and the store owner identified him as the man who bought something in his store using a credit card, and immigration authorities reported his whereabouts. Ryan was impressed by their quick work, but he wasn't going to cut them any slack. Ryan met with Detectives Alito and Martinelli in a small hotel conference room. He told detectives he was recording their conversation on his iPhone, which they did not object to. Alito: "Mr. Bodine, were you in the Galleria Umberto area in Naples 2 days ago?" Ryan: "What's this about, detective?" Alito: "We are investigating a situation that you may know something about as a witness." Ryan: "That sounds suspicious. As a courtesy, I will answer some questions, but if I get the impression that you are trying to pin any blame on me, I will hire an Italian lawyer, and a representative from the U.S. Embassy to attend the interrogation. Martinelli, we understand. You have the right to stop the interview if you feel you need a lawyer. Alito, please answer my question. Ryan, after a pause and a thoughtful look, yes, I was shopping with my wife and the tour group we were with 2 days ago in an area our guide called Galleria Umberto. Alito, were you holding and walking with a young woman while you were there? Ryan, yes. Alito, what were the circumstances? Ryan, the youngest member of our group, 18-year-old Stacy Warren, did not show up at the scheduled time for the bus that was supposed to take us back to the hotel. I went looking for her using the tracking app on her mother's iPhone and found her. She fell hard and was somewhat delirious, so I helped her back to the bus. Then yesterday, I took her to the doctor to make sure her injuries weren't serious. Martinelli, why did you take her to the doctor and not her mother? Ryan, because I'm her lawyer, she trusts me, and she wanted me to take her. Alito, how long have you been her lawyer? Ryan, from the third day of our trip a week now, when she asked me some questions about copywriting a project she was doing outside of school. I am primarily an intellectual property attorney, and to make sure there was no doubt that we had an attorney-client relationship, I asked her to sign my standard form, and she paid me $1. Alito, laughing, that's all you charge, I might want to hire you. Ryan, sorry, this is my bet just for her, the young girl I fell in love with like a favorite niece. Martinelli, your representation is only on copyright issues. Ryan, no for all legal matters. Alito, did you meet 3 young men while you were looking for Miss Warren? Ryan, what do you mean met? I saw a lot of young people, more than 3, while I was looking for Stacy. Alito, did you see specifically 3 young men who were beaten? Ryan, how would I know they were beaten? Alito, because they were lying on the ground, wounded. Ryan, what, like a motorcycle accident? Stop being vague and get to the point. Are you accusing me of assaulting someone? Martinelli, 3 young men were seriously injured. Ryan, are these 3 upstanding young men with no criminal records? Alito, why do you ask that? Ryan, because I think they might have been in some kind of altercation with another group. Maybe it was gangster activity. Again, get to the point. Do you think I had anything to do with their injuries? Alito, you have? Ryan, since I don't know what kind of young people you're talking about, how can I answer correctly? After asking a few more questions, receiving only vague answers from Ryan, and realizing that since he was a lawyer, they were unlikely to get anything worthwhile, they changed their approach. Martinelli, would you agree for us to look at your hotel room? Ryan, if it makes you stop asking me tough questions and leave, yes. I'll take you there right now. I just ask you not to touch my wife's things. Ryan took them to his room, showed them his representation agreement with Stacy and the signed dollar, and allowed them to look around the room. They were clearly looking for the distinctive shirt he wore yesterday, but they couldn't find it. Martinelli, in the video we have, you were accompanied by Miss Warren wearing a distinctive blue shirt. I can't find it here. Ryan, that's right. It had Miss Warren's blood on it from her fall, and I was sure it was ruined, so I threw it in the hotel trash that night, along with Miss Warren's stained top and skirt. Martinelli and Alito exchanged glances. Alito, we'd like to talk to Miss Warren. Ryan, as her lawyer, I will advise her not to talk to you, and if you insist, I will find her an Italian lawyer and a representative from the embassy, and when we meet with you, they will advise her not to talk to you. Martinelli, why would you do this? Do you have something to hide? Ryan, I am very protective of my clients and do not want her to be persecuted because she fell on the streets of your wonderful city. Alito, how do we know she fell? Ryan, listen, I'm going to call the doctor who treated her yesterday, and tell him that he can answer the question of whether her injuries could have been caused by a hard fall on a city street. In fact, I'll call him right now, and you can ask him a question. Ryan called the doctor's number and waited 5 minutes until the doctor finished with another patient. Ryan then said, "Doctor Lombardi, I have two detectives here from Naples. They want to ask you a question. As Miss Warren's lawyer, I agreed that you could answer the question, is this okay with you? Great, I'll give the phone to Detective Alito." Handing the phone to Alito, he said, "Please speak English so I can understand you." Alito: "I have your card that Mr. Bodine, Dr. Lombardi gave me. Can you confirm that you are Dr. Lombardi and provide the information on your card? Thank you. Did you treat Miss Warren yesterday? Do you have information about how she was injured? Although you don't know exactly how she was injured, are the injuries consistent with a fall? A hard fall on a city street, you say? Thank you, doctor. I will end the call now since Mr. Bodine has no further questions for you." Alito: "We may have more questions for you, Mr. Bodine." Ryan: "Sorry, I won't be answering any more questions because I get the impression that you are unfairly trying to pin the attack on me. If you want, I will hire an Italian lawyer and you can talk to him or her." Martinelli: "Please hire a lawyer and have him or her call us. Here's a card from me and one from Detective Alito." Ryan: "I will." Ryan called the lawyer he had already hired and asked him to call Alito or Martinelli the next day and decline any further interviews. Fortunately, this was the last he heard from the police, partly because Ryan's Italian lawyer confirmed that the three scoundrels, despite being only 18, 20, and 21 years old, each had long criminal records and were suspected of the others' crimes against tourists for which they were not arrested. "I don't think finding whoever beat these three is a high priority for the Naples police. Most likely, they are glad that they got what they deserved," the lawyer told him. Ryan told Stacy the good news during a tour later that day. "Now can I tell my mom what really happened?" she asked. "Okay, but tell her not to tell anyone else, including Sylvia," Ryan replied. "You're my hero," Stacy said, giving Ryan a big hug and kiss on the cheek before running off to get ready for their daily activities. After dinner that evening, Stacy approached Mary and told her the real story of what happened. "These guys would have done terrible things to me and probably killed me if Ryan hadn't saved me," Stacy said, crying. This brought tears to Mary's eyes as well. "Mother, I want you to get rid of Tim and steal Ryan from Sylvia. I want him to be my stepfather. He's perfect." "Why do you think he's interested in me?" Mary answered. "Oh my God, Mom, are you blind? He thinks you're the most amazing woman in the world, and his relationship with Sylvia is tense." "How do you know that, Stacy?" "From everything he told me, and from my keen observations and knowledge of human feelings, this is how it is. Now come up with a plan to seduce him, okay?" Stacy said seriously, although with a wide smile. That night, Mary woke up sweating in the middle of the night from a dream about Ryan. Day 12. The tour went to the beautiful exotic island of Capri, where they would spend 3 days and 2 nights. Everyone was amazed by its natural beauty and high-end shopping opportunities. The little boat ride around the island was almost dreamlike. The only bad part for Ryan was when he looked at Mary through his dark wrapping glasses, hoping to fool everyone except Stacy that he wasn't staring at her, and felt dizzy. "I haven't had any wine or other alcohol in 3 days," he thought to himself before stopping watching to clear his head. Day 13. Ryan signed up for the 9 a.m. sailing trip. Stacy, Sylvia, and 2 other women took a blood oath that they would shop all day until they had visited every store on the island, but everyone else had their own plans. Mary was vague in hers. When Ryan arrived at the sailing site, he learned that his reservation had been canceled and that there were no more places available. Gloating, he asked the owner to check again. With a big smile and the best English he could muster, the owner replied, "I see a reservation for Ryan and Mary at 1 p.m. Confused but with no alternatives, Ryan returned to the hotel. When he arrived, Mary was waiting for him in the lobby wearing shorts, a skimpy top, and flip-flops. He didn't understand what was happening, but he couldn't muster his anger as he looked at her attractive face and slender body. "I'm sorry for canceling your reservation without warning and moving it to 1:00 p.m. for the two of us, but I really need to talk to you privately and show you something." What could he say to this other than okay? Mary took his hand and said, "What I need to show you before the conversation is in my room." As they approached Mary and Stacy's room, Ryan noticed a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the doorknob, but it didn't catch his attention. As soon as Mary opened the door, she bowed and gestured with her hand, indicating for Ryan to enter first. Upon entering, he noticed that the room was neat. The coverlet on the so-called Italian double bed had been removed, and only one lamp was on the table by the bed. Ryan turned around when he heard the door close. Ryan wasn't prepared for what he saw. Mary stood at the door completely naked, except for an ankle bracelet and a pair of earrings. Perhaps there are some heterosexual men who might resist Mary. There are very few of them, and Ryan was not one of them. Ryan had dreamed of this moment since he first saw Mary under the full moon the night they met, and she had dreamed of it ever since. The lovers woke up almost simultaneously, more than an hour later. They smiled widely at each other. Words were few, they were not necessary. Both knew two things: they had never been so happy, and nothing will be the same again. They were finally able to drag themselves out of bed, shower together, eat a few handfuls of nuts, and barely make it to the dock by 1 p.m. As the small sailboat cut through the deep blue waters of the Mediterranean around the magical island of Capri, a radiant halo almost surrounded Mary's face. Once again, Ryan felt an inner glow that overwhelmed him, leaving him dizzy. With the wind blowing her shiny, curly blonde hair back, Mary smiled at him and asked over the noise of the wind, "What are you thinking about?" After a long pause, Ryan replied, "I must be in heaven." Shopaholics were enthusiastic at dinner that night, showing off their purchases. Mary and Ryan were thoughtful, saying little, but with satisfied smiles on their faces. After dinner, Stacy walked up to Ryan, pulled his ear toward her mouth, and whispered, "Don't you want to be with a better woman every day?" Ryan turned red with embarrassment, and Stacy laughed and ran away. Days 14-16. Everyone continued to enjoy their trip, even after returning from enchanting Capri to the Amalfi Coast. Sylvia disappeared for several hours every day, demonstrating an adventurous spirit that Ryan had never before seen in her, renting a small motorcycle to ride around the area. Stacy continued to participate in all activities with Ryan, but seemed to mysteriously disappear when Mary approached Ryan and motioned for him to go to her room. Ryan wasn't observant enough to know if the other members of the tour knew, except Stacy, who seemed very pleased with the fact that Mary was admiring his body every day. He decided not to worry. His thoughts were completely confused. He was struggling with conflicting emotions and feelings that were either long dead or just developing. Day 17. Throughout most of the excursion, Gina ensured that the group ate mostly at authentic local Italian restaurants. For a change of scenery that night, she took them to a restaurant that was clearly aimed at inexperienced American tourists. Loud, often banal music played continuously. Some songs were of Italian origin, others of American origin. Some sang in Italian, others in English. Ryan was sitting at the table with Sylvia on one side and Stacy on the other, and Mary sitting opposite him. His inattentive eyes noticed with surprise that Sylvia was dressed in clothes he had never seen before and looked so authentically Italian that if he had not been with her for over 20 years, he would have thought she was a local resident. He was surprised when Stacy told him a funny story and then quietly added, "You're the best dad-to-be," which is what she often started calling him. Suddenly, Dean Martin's voice filled the inn. Almost in slow motion, Ryan heard the words. He was looking at Mary when the words came out. "When the moon shines like a big pizza." He suddenly remembered how amazed he was when the light of the full moon illuminated Mary on the first night of their meeting. His thoughts drifted to the way the sunlight reflected off Mary's hair on the sailboat after their first intimacy, when he heard, When the world seems so bright, it's like you've had too much wine. Ryan resolved all his doubts and confusion in his emotions when he thought about how often he felt dizzy when looking at Mary, hearing the words, "When you walk in your sleep, but know that you are not dreaming, sir." "It's amore," he whispered to himself and repeated, looking at Mary's smiling face. She blew him a kiss. That night, unaware of each other, Ryan, Sylvia, Mary, and Stacy had trouble sleeping. Something needed to be resolved. Day 18. After breakfast, Sylvia pulled Ryan aside just as he called her away at the same time, and they simultaneously said, "We need to talk." After exchanging wide smiles, Sylvia said, "I'll go first." They went to a beautiful veranda overlooking the blue Mediterranean Sea, where the sun's rays played on the water and the birds circled in the sky, and sat down in privacy from everyone else. After a few minutes of looking out to sea, Sylvia turned to Ryan and took his hands. "I was absent-minded and not a very good wife for more than a year. I finally resolved a lot of things in my head and felt at peace for the first time in a long time. I need to tell you a story," she began. Sylvia told Ryan all about how she found out about her birth parents, her birth name Gabriella Amendola, her feelings of emptiness that carry over into her interactions with him and others, and her strong desire for this trip to see if she can find a connection with your roots. At some point, a hotel employee approached them and asked if they wanted something to drink. In what Ryan thought was perfect Italian, Sylvia quickly responded. The surprised employee nodded and left. When she saw the surprised look on his face, she said, "I've been learning Italian for a while now and have been practicing it this entire trip when there are no Americans around." Then, after a long pause, came the blow. "I paid a deposit for a small house in Ravello and began the emigration process. I'm staying in Italy. I will arrange for everything you need to be delivered here. I hope you can help Austin and Brittany with this. I feel truly at home and at peace for the first time in my life. It's not a reflection on you. You were the best husband anyone could wish, for I just know now where I belong. I'm so glad you found new love in Mary. It allows me to do it guilt-free," Sylvia said with a shy smile. Ryan guessed that his admiration for Mary was not subtle. Fortunately, Sylvia's words saved him from having to explain to her that he was leaving her for Mary. They looked at each other in silence for several minutes. Ryan's thoughts went from stunned to amazed to surprised to accepted to excited in those moments. "You know we're going to have to get a divorce," he finally said without a confrontational tone. "I know it's necessary for everyone," she replied. "I will help you in any way I can, and I would like to see your house. Talk to Mary and Stacy, and then we'll take a taxi or the hotel bus and go there this afternoon," she smiled. Ryan found Mary leaving the breakfast area. She had started later than Ryan and Sylvia. He took her to another veranda with a beautiful view and sat her down. "I realized last night in my conscious mind, although my subconscious probably knew it from the moment I first saw you, that I was madly, head over heels, passionately in love with you, Mary." Mary smiled, understanding, and softly replied, "I know I knew it before you admitted it to yourself, before we made love for the first time, before I realized I felt the same way about you." They exchanged a kiss. "What's your relationship like with Tim?" "He has already filed for divorce and physically removed from my home. The locks changed and a security company hired. I honor the marriage contract. There will be no problems or delays." "What is your relationship with Sylvia?" "She's moving to Italy. She put down a deposit on a house in Ravello and wants us, you, me, and Stacy, to see it this afternoon. I'll file for divorce as soon as I get back to Virginia. This will be a peaceful process." Mary smiled. "Do you have any other plans when we get back to Virginia?" "I hope to move in with the love of my life and her daughter, whom I also fell in love with, and make love in every room of her house and every day of the year until I can bear that passion which she kindles in me." Mary smiled even wider. "Sounds like a plan. Let's tell Stacy." Stacy cried on Mary and Ryan's shoulders for a good 5 minutes before a big smile appeared on her face. Let's go swimming as a family, Mom and Dad, and then we'll go see Sylvia's house. Ryan, Stacy, and Mary oohed and awed when they saw Sylvia's new home. They left Sylvia at a hotel in Ravello near her home, promising to send her all her belongings the next day. That night, Stacy slept in Ryan and Sylvia's room, and Ryan and Mary spent their first night together making love. Their smiles the next morning were brighter than the sun. Day 19. On a first-class flight on the way back home, Mary sat on Ryan's lap while Stacy sat next to him, holding his hand. Stacy smiled at him and said, "I love you, new dad." "I love you, new daughter," he replied. Mary kissed him and then sang softly in his ear, "When the moon hits your eyes like a big pizza, that's amore." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next